Welcome everybody to the second day of the SSEP National Conference. We are very excited to have you all here today. We had a great day yesterday with wonderful student presentations, and I'm looking forward to many more today. First off, though, we're going to have a very special featured presentation by Dr. Roger Launius, who is a senior curator here at the National Air and Space Museum at the Division of Space History. He was the chief historian at NASA from 1990 to 2002, and we're very excited to have him talk to you about spaceflight and American culture today.
Well, hello everybody. I am Roger Launius. I'm here at the Division of Space History, and welcome to the National Air and Space Museum. It's a great place to visit, is it not? Let's hope so. I'm going to give you a little talk today for just a few minutes about where we are in context of especially human spaceflight and where we might be headed into the future. And it's essentially the same talk that I gave last week at the National Academy of Sciences, where there is a group of specialists who are looking at charting a strategic vision for the future of human spaceflight that asked me to come and speak to them. So let me kind of walk through these slides ever so quickly and talk a bit about where we are and where we have been and where we might be going into the future. Some of you may have studied the history of this a bit, and one of the things that is very large in that context is the fact that the Cold War crisis of the 1940s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s really dominated the early years of the space age. And in the 50s and 60s, there was this competition between the United States and the Soviet Union over a whole series of issues, but one of them was the context of spaceflight. And that propelled a heavy investment of dollars into the technology to engage in these activities, and it also then propelled both the United States and the Soviet Union, now Russia, to open its human spaceflight activities up and to compete with each other on a race to the moon. And here you can see a picture from a cover of Time magazine with an astronaut and a cosmonaut obviously racing to the moon. That was a fundamental part of what was taking place in the 1960s. And we all know that the United States won that race and the Soviet Union did not reach the moon with humans. And the Apollo program was the fundamental piece of that. And so this Cold War competition is a dominant frame of understanding what took place early on. Beyond that, there's a cultural frame as well. We have always had this kind of belief that exploration is a good thing, that we want to go out and find out what is beyond the river and at the top of the mountain and wherever else it happens to be. And that this has been a fundamental part of what it means to be an American. As we crossed the expanse of the continent of North America and settled in places far-flung from where people originally were in the 19th century. So that is a second frame of reference. And then finally there is another frame of reference that is about economics and commerce. Engaging in spaceflight activities as we have done in the past in terms of terrestrial exploration has brought economic return, economic benefit, and commercial activities. And if you don't believe that, think for a moment how your life would be different if we did not fly in space. And you can begin by taking away global instantaneous telecommunications. So your internet connectivity to see what's happening real time anywhere in the world, your ability to instant message or Skype with people around the globe would be gone. Beyond that, lots of television, lots of other types of communication systems would not be present either. Or we'd have to find alternative ways to do it, which we don't really have the capability for at this point. And we have engaged in this over a period of years and come to not think about it at all. How many of you have one of these? Most of you. How many of you check where you're located and find your way someplace else using one of these? You can take that away too if you did not fly in space. It's ubiquitous, and very few people think about such things when they think about the space age and what it means to engage in space activities. But those are very real issues, and they have become very important to us. Most of us don't even bother to have maps in our cars anymore. And that's the result of the space age as well, and our ability to navigate using these kinds of electronic devices. All of those are a part of the frames of reference that we think about when we think about the history of the space age and what it means. But we did not go to the moon. And let me begin by taking a poll. How many of you would like to see astronauts stand on the moon once again? Raise your hands. Okay, most of you. Everybody does believe they stood on the moon once upon a time, don't you? If anybody questions that, then we have to have a larger conversation. But they did indeed, and I, for one, would like to go back as well. I'd love to see astronauts on the moon again before I'm gone. How many of you would prefer to see humans standing on Mars as opposed to the moon? Okay, a sizable number. This is a debate that's been taking place for a number of years. It's the debate that I refer to as taking place between the lunatics and the Martians. I come down on the side of the lunatics because I actually think that there's a lot to be gained by going back to the moon. But all through the time in which the Apollo program took place, and that's what this chart shows, the majority of the public, generally speaking, didn't think it was a great idea to do this. We have this kind of fond recollection, it's almost a nostalgia when we think back on this, that the space program and the human activities associated with it and the Apollo program and going to the moon were very popular, and they weren't. Most of the time, if you look at that chart, the people who say, and the question was, should the government fund human trips to the moon? The people who say, yeah, I think they should, are in blue. The people who said, no, I don't think so, I think we should spend our money somewhere else, are in red. And for much of the time, it's fairly close, but also for much of the time, the majority of the people say, no, I don't think we should. We did not go to the moon because everybody agreed it was a great idea to do it. We did it because of that larger Cold War competition with the Soviet Union that I told you about a moment ago. And when we return to the moon, we're going to have to do it on a different basis than everybody thinking it's a great idea. We may well do that. And let me suggest to you one of the reasons why I don't think we have gone back recently. By the way, the moon landings were successful. They cost about $25 billion in change in 1960s dollars. You can make that about $150 billion today, and it was still a bargain in my mind. The first landing was on the 20th of July in 1969, 6 successful landings altogether, 3 circumlunar flights, one of which was not intended to be circumlunar, Apollo 13. Everybody seen the movie with Tom Hanks? And a tremendous return in terms of technology and science out of this particular project. But let me suggest to you why I don't think we have gone back since the early 1970s. You see this picture? This is from Apollo 17. That is Herschel Schmidt standing by the lunar rover. You can see that he's on the lip of a crater on the moon. And it's a good picture in a lot of ways. And in other ways, it's a troubling photo. It's because of images like this that we've not gone back. The reality is, what we have is a very, very tiny astronaut and a very, very tiny footprint of humanity and lots and lots and lots of nothing but lots and lots and lots of nothing. We didn't find anything there anybody wanted. Buzz Aldrin said it best when he called it magnificent desolation. It's just rocks. At least that's what we found. It's because we didn't find anything we wanted that it was easy to say, we're going to end the Apollo program, and we've not been back now for nearly 40 years. That doesn't mean that there's not things there that we want. We just haven't found them yet. And we won't find them until we actually go back. This is the NASA budget over time, and I just want to kind of give you this story a little bit. If you look on the left-hand side of that chart, you'll see a spike toward the beginning part of it that shows the budget going up very, very sharply in the early 1960s and then starting to bottom out as the latter 1960s turn into the 1970s. Can you see that? And then there is this gradual rise over time of money, and this is all adjusted for inflation, to the extent that NASA has a budget that is a little more than half of what it was during the Apollo era. Now, that's not an insignificant amount, but it's also not enough to do all the things that NASA is asked to do. So we are at a moment in time where we have to make some decisions. The space shuttle has ceased its operations. It has been retired, and we have to find a new vehicle for engaging in human spaceflight activities. We are going to do that, and we're going to do that in part because of a chart like this, which suggests that when the public is asked, do you approve of the civilian spaceflight program? And the answer is overwhelmingly yes, they do. There was a period in the very early and late 1970s, very early 1980s, where it wasn't quite as strong as it is today, but since then it's been well over 60%. In many cases it's approaching 80% of the people say, yes, I think this is important, we need to do it. And in that context, NASA is now searching for a new way to engage in spaceflight activities, one that maximizes its capabilities as well as relies upon a civilian space component. And we've been doing this for a number of years, trying to think through how to engage in these activities that will get us beyond low Earth orbit. There's the slide here basically talks about efforts to make the moon a second home. And we wanted to do so in the 1970s. We tried it again in the late part of the 1980s. The president in 2004 made a similar statement. None of those have come to fruition, and now we're going to try a different approach. That different approach is to use commercial carriers like SpaceX's Falcon 9 and the Dragon capsule to support the International Space Station, which, with any luck at all, will enable us to move NASA's efforts beyond low Earth orbit and to seek activities to go to the moon, perhaps to go to Mars, probably not with people anytime soon, as this chart will tell you that most people are not in favor of that, or maybe to an asteroid, that's another target. And all of those are potentials for the future. None of them have come to pass as yet. I think you all are going to be able to see some of these things take place. Whether or not it's going to be a human mission to Mars, a human mission to the moon, a human mission to an asteroid, who knows? But you have it within your power to make this happen. As people who are engaged in this at a fundamental level, even as individuals who are going to be voters and citizens and leaders of the future, you have it within your power to realize these dreams. And that's perhaps the greatest gift of all. With that, let me close and simply to say that there are rationales for spaceflight that are present. We mostly don't think about them too much, but they are nonetheless very real, very significant, and we need to pursue logical courses toward the future. The image that you can see here is of the Earth. And I think one of the things that's going to happen in the 21st century is we're going to be looking back more and more on Earth as we journey outward, and I'd like to think that that's the case. So with that, let me close and simply suggest to you that we have a huge and significant future before us with enormous challenges, but that's the nature of every age at every time. And I wish you all the best with both your conference as well as these prospects for the future as we try to realize the dream of spaceflight. Anyway, thank you very much. And with that, I will close. Do we have time for questions or comments?
I think we have a little bit time for questions. If anybody has a burning question they want to ask. Thank you, first of all, for a very wonderful presentation. And we do have time for a couple of questions, so if you have a question, please.
I noticed in the chart that you had of the whether people want to see people on the moon again, that in 2003 both of them were more in favor. What was going on in 2003? And in '99 for Mars too.
Yeah, I think I think in 2003. Now, remember what was taking place at that particular point in time. These tables, these polling things do respond to what's taking place in larger society. This was at the time that we had lost Columbia. The space shuttle on February 1st of that particular year. And in the aftermath of that, one of the things that typically happens, Americans are great at this. Whenever there's a crisis, we all tend to band together to solve the crisis. And I think that's kind of a response that you got at that particular point in time. Is that, you know, this is not going to dissuade us. Yes, this is a horrible accident, and we lost 7 people, and it's a terrible thing. But we're not going to be turned around from achieving what we have set out to try to achieve. And I think that may be part of the reason, but maybe not all of it. Who knows? Thank you very much. Have a good day.